We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio. It seems that President Biden is lurching from crisis to crisis, both at home and abroad, and is unable to catch a break. The question is, are these problems all of his own making? I'm joined by longtime host of Liberty Nation Radio and senior political analyst for LibertyNation.com, Tim Donner, to see if we can't uncover the clues to Joe Biden's perpetual state of fear and chaos. Welcome, Tim. Thanks for coming.
Always good to be here, Mark.
So, Tim, one thing many folks have been waiting for is the infamous Durham report. Now, you wrote on this on Liberty Nation very recently, and a very, very good piece. I recommend everybody read it. But you wrote that promises had been made again and again for the Durham report, and they've never come to fruition. But is it too late to matter? And what outcomes do you expect if and when it finally comes?
Well, Mark, the whole point is that it is too late to matter. That's apparently what was intended, to just stall this thing so long that it would go past the election, which it would affect the 2020 presidential election. Of course, it's too late to matter. Would you expect the outcome to be any different ultimately? We hoped it would be, but this is sort of final confirmation of how impossible it is, Mark, to ultimately break the grip of the political establishment. You know, it seemed that as this thing about Trump and Russia seemed to grow into something that took on a life of its own, regardless of whether it was true or not, there was one guy who we thought might be, if anybody could get to the heart of the matter and tell us what happened with credibility, it was Bill Barr. I mean, he was a guy who was a D.C. veteran, conservative stalwart. If anybody could get to the truth, it was him. Well, he did nothing in the Durham investigation, which he empowered, has now gone on for more than 3 years. And for the point of comparison, the Mueller investigation was 2 years. It's an insult to Trump voters to come out now and say, hey, the report's about to come out. Mark, how many times did we hear that over the last 3 years and 3 months since the Durham investigation began? How many times?
I've stopped counting, Tim, but it really seems that with so many Democrats so keen to chant the phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. Well, it seems that for both Donald Trump, the man, and the people who voted for Donald Trump, or in fact just the people who would like to know that their government is not engaged in spying and on presidential candidates, it seems that justice has been denied. Now, so in general, Tim, it's really not been a good time for America or for Joe Biden, especially with the fall of Kabul and the Taliban taking power. This has been a major blow to American prestige worldwide. But how does the future look for Biden on the world stage now?
Well, there's no way to understate the horrors of what's going on in Kabul. It looks more like Saigon 1975 every day. Another subject I wrote about. Together with the border crisis on our southern border, this is Biden's legacy right now. And the irony, Mark, is that the only thing that's likely to save Biden is a return to the Trump policies that he overthrew, both in Afghanistan and on the southern border in Afghanistan. Trump was in the process of negotiating with the Taliban, but I don't think there's anybody in the country with any degree of intellectual honesty who believes that Trump would allow to happen what's happening now under his successor, Joe Biden. I mean, it's a disaster. It's irreversible in the march of history. These images will be there forever, tied together to the end of the Vietnam War and the shame of it all. And Iraq and Afghanistan come to a crashing halt. 20 years of blood and treasure. And we're right back to where we started. It's the same thing. It's the same Taliban that we unseated after 9/11. And here they are 20 years later, they're back, which is bad enough. But the humiliation of being chased out, of refugees hanging on helicopters. The worst case scenario is all happening right before our eyes. And the thing about it, Mark, is that it was so avoidable. There were so many strategies that could have been employed for getting our people and refugees out safely. And now he withdraws every troop on the ground, and now we'll have to send back 2, 3, 4 times as many to try and salvage a disastrous situation. It's going to be a long time before he gets over it, and I suspect that he will go down with Jimmy Carter and the failed rescue attempt of Iranian hostages in 1980 is one of the most futile acts of foreign policy in American history. The only hope Joe Biden has is that the media will protect him. But how far can they even go?
So we've actually, speaking of this particular situation, we've seen plenty of stories pointing out that Donald Trump had also planned to withdraw troops. But as you pointed out earlier, Tim, it's quite obvious that Donald Trump, if he'd have seen one city fall, he would have sent in the planes pretty much straight away. I mean, we've seen this.
If he'd seen one person, one American die.
It's ridiculous and dishonest to think that he wouldn't. But Joe Biden, he's been in office for about 7 months, and his one main goal seems to have been to undo every single policy that he could of Donald J. Trump. And yet we've already had Joe Biden trying to blame Donald Trump for this one when he spent 7 months trying to get rid of policies, but he decided to keep this one and didn't even do it to the full extent that Donald Trump wanted it. How can it be Donald Trump's fault if he's got rid of every other Donald Trump policy but decided to keep this one? Surely that comes down to what Jean-Paul Sartre said, we are our choices.
I think the statute of limitations has all but run out on blaming Donald Trump. And I think it ran out this weekend with the images in Kabul, because nobody, even in the leftist media, could claim that Donald Trump would have let that happen. There's no way that he would have let that happen. It would have been after one single breach of whatever agreement Trump signed with the Taliban. He would have rained down terror upon them. They knew it. Everybody knows it. The left won't admit it. But the thing about this, Mark, that keeps eating at me is that this isn't an ideological failure. This isn't trying to pack the court. This isn't trying to end the filibuster. This isn't trying to federalize elections. This is the same outcome that Donald Trump wanted. So it all comes down to competence. And it's hard to believe that given his almost 50 years in Washington and the foreign policy team, which if nothing else has had considerable experience, would allow such a sudden withdrawal, just abandoning our air base in the middle of the night. No indication of why or for what reason it had happened. The incompetence of it is truly perplexing, because one thing Biden did offer was experience, 47 years in Washington. And yet this was a withdrawal that you would have thought someone like Jimmy Carter with no experience in foreign policy might have tried to pull off. It just perplexes me how they didn't take care of Americans before it was too late, because it wouldn't have been that difficult, Mark.
Tim, final question for you, if I may. Now, as a candidate and then as president-elect, Joe Biden warned of a dark winter. And now I know you've written about this a while back on libertynation.com, so I just want to revisit it for a moment here. Now, it seems that this dark winter has come to pass, but there's no sign of spring. Your thoughts?
Well, we thought we were past the pandemic, and now we have the Delta variant, and we have tremendous controversy on how to deal with it. I thought, and certainly the Biden people thought, most people thought we'd be past it by now. We're not past it, and we've got all kinds of controversies about masks and vaccines and mandates. Inflation has reared its head for the first time in many years. It's taken longer than I expected. I thought it would happen years ago. That's a tax that robs every single living person. The border can no longer be ignored. It wasn't just a winter thing like Joe Biden promised. Remember, he said, well, this happens every winter, and it slows down the rate of people crossing the border in the summer. That didn't happen. We're setting records for the entire century. That's something where, again, he's going to have to go back to the Trump policies. And the shame of Afghanistan is going to stick like super glue to Biden's legacy unless this surge of troops, whether it's 3, 6, 8, 12, whatever thousand are necessary to spare the final shame and humiliation, that's going to stick to Biden's legacy, like I said, forever. So it's not going well. And I think those of us, who were skeptical of a Biden presidency to begin with, maybe we need to fall back on the fact that he is the president. This is our country. And we don't want him to fail like he's failing now.
Tim Donner, thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Mark. Always a pleasure.
Now, don't go away. Later in the show, we'll be talking liberty with Scott Cosenza and figuring out just how and why your rights are in trouble like never before, right here on the Radio America Network. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.